And I gotta say, you've got some really deep Ohio roots.
My father was just one generation away from Birmingham, England, so I asked Ancestry.com to focus on my mother's side. Even I was not aware how entrenched in Ohio her father and mother were. Among the discoveries, my mother's father's grandfather, John Matthews from Gallia County, was a Union volunteer in the Civil War. A lung ailment kept him off the front lines, so he drove the horse-drawn ambulance throughout the war. But that's not what impressed researcher Michelle Erkenbrack most.
Do you see how many kids this man had?
Whoa.
Yes, he and wife Lydia brought 16 Matthews into the world, putting them to work, helping him run his farm. On my mother's side, her mother's father was David Keeler, here with wife Pearl. They lived in Darke County in the Bradford area in the late 1800s. Frequently, they'd be visited by his mother's first cousin riding in on her white horse and then putting him to shame when they went hunting. Yep, my first cousin, 4 times removed, is Phoebe Ann Moses. You might know her as Annie Oakley.
We did look at that, and I think you're right.
You think? I hope so.
But as compelling as those lives were, Michelle says it was Annie Oakley's first cousin twice removed, whose story went deep to her heart.
The character that really sings out to me is Elsie.
My grandmother, Elsie Keeler, one of 6 children born to tobacco farmer David and Pearl Keeler. Michelle says her research showed the family moved around a lot, very likely as tenant farmers.
She decided that's not what she wanted for herself.
In fact, Grandma Elsie went to nursing school in Dayton in the mid-20s and then made the break to Columbus around 1929 to start her life, quickly getting a job as a nurse at the old Ohio Penitentiary. An inmate gave her this ring in 1930, crafted from prison toothbrushes. She would give it to her little sister, Alice. That same year, my grandmother met a handsome mailman by the name of Marshall Matthews, grandson of the aforementioned prolific John Matthews. Ancestry.com found the marriage license showing in June of 1931 my grandmother married Marshall Matthews. Both were working, both were happy. Just over 9 months later, on March 19th of 1932, my mother Elizabeth made them a family.
I mean, you just see so much hope and promise there.
But it was the depths of the Depression, and just over a year later, the world would deal Elsie an almost inconceivable double tragedy. This picture, taken outside their house on Malvern Avenue in early July 1933, shows a proud daddy holding my mother, then just 16 months old. My grandmother Elsie was pregnant, and all seemed well. But just days after this picture was taken, my grandfather awoke to a terrible sore throat, headache, and 106-degree fever. Admitted to White Cross Hospital on July 14th, the man who had survived the Spanish flu pandemic that claimed his mother and brother in 1918 was fading fast, slipping into a coma, a common progression for encephalitis lethargica, known also as sleepy sickness. Perhaps the stress sent my grandmother into labor more than 6 weeks early, and on July 30th, she delivered my Uncle Marshall at home, and...
Do you recognize all of those names?
No.
My grandmother had delivered twins, a little girl. She named her Norma Jean. She died the next day. Her death certificate shows cause of death as premature birth. Grandma was hospitalized with serious complications, but the tragedy deepened one day after Norma Jean's death. Marshall Matthews died. It was August 1st, 1933.
To have to bury your husband and your infant daughter, and to have to face the 30s. I mean, she didn't know it was coming, but it was such a terrible time for all Americans during the Great Depression. To have to face that alone.
My grandmother, still in intensive care, could not see them buried. But she did recover, and with heroic courage and working 2 jobs, she was determined to hold her family together.
She persevered, and she never gave up on those kids.